Okay, we are back to talk about Severance Season 2, Episode 8, titled Sweet Vitriol. This episode is written by Adam County and Casey Perry and directed by Ben Stiller. Episode 8 follows Harmony Cobel to Salt's Neck, a mining town where she grew up and began working for Lumen in an ether factory. Lumen has since abandoned the town, and most of its remaining population there are old, frail, and addicted to ether. Harmony sees an old friend and colleague, Hampton, and asks him to help her sneak back into her mother's house. Harmony's Aunt Sissy is still there, but does not want Harmony to have anything to do with her mother or that house or really with her. Harmony searches through the basement of the house where she finds old notebooks from her time in the Wintertide Fellowship, where she came up with the idea and plans for the severance procedure. Sissy tries to burn them, but Cobel is able to salvage them. As she drives out of town, Cobel answers a call from Devon, learns about Mark's reintegration, and tells them she wants to know everything. So I think it's been 5 episodes since we've seen Cobel. We saw her
Yeah.
start to go towards Salton Neck and then turn back around. Now we see her visit this town, learn about a little bit about her backstory. Very interesting episode. I think good way of balancing both what she did in the past and what is happening to her now. Um, but again, sort of one of these standalone episodes. What sort of stood out to you most? Where should we take this conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed it personally. I'm not sure what the reactions are entirely in the world. Just came out today or last night. Um, another People have taken to calling these departure episodes, which I kind of like. This stemming out of the fact that they are not bottle episodes, technically,
Right.
right?
Definitely not
But
this one.
no, a bottle episode means that like they're using just the standing set and just the cast members, and so one of the suggestions was, well, we want a term for an episode like this, which is just kind of outside of the narrative in a different place or whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of embracing departure episode. I'm not sure if that's catching on with the world or not. I did think it was a little bit of a risk though to basically have two of those in a row, whatever we call
Yeah.
them, right?
Yeah.
Um, and it's starting to feel like, oh, it's been a while since I've seen any Dylan. How's Dylan doing?
Yeah,
You know?
I was gonna ask you about this because I think part of the appeal certainly of this show is the Mark, Ellie, Dylan, Irv relationship, and we're now gonna have gone 3 weeks without any of that. I presume we'll get back to it next week, but yeah, I found myself kind of missing it despite liking this episode a lot.
Yeah. And I mean, well, I mean, I wonder though, even because you have Mark going through reintegration, but now Ragabi's sort of out of the picture. I said previously, I thought Ragabi was right to say don't call Harmony Cobel.
Yeah.
Maybe that's something to talk about here. When Devin called, she kept trying to call. Um, but I take it she started trying to call after Mark woke up. That's how I read this. Do you agree?
Yes. Yes, I absolutely agree. Yes.
Like she pitched her plan to Mark and says, "Okay, let's start trying to call Cobel here." Ragabi just up and left.
Yes.
But
Yes.
there's a question about Ragabi's motivation. Should we trust her? It is the fact that PD died trying to do this, and so
Hmm.
on. Um, so I find that dynamic really interesting. I'm not saying that they should trust Cobel. I don't think they should trust Cobel either. But in other words, sorry, are we going to go back into the office next week with our any friends? I mean, I kind of hope so, but given the narrative, I don't know if the next move is Mark going back to work. You know what I mean?
It will be hard to, I think, yeah, string through a narrative of everybody's just back in the office and we're figuring out what happens there while you've got Cobell racing back that direction, while you've got what's happening on the outside with Devin and Ragabi. We've got to tie these pieces in together somehow. It's going to be, I guess, a little disjointed if, yeah, we just spend 45 minutes in the Lumen severed floor next week.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it would have to be maybe they do manage to carry out this plan of talking to Mark Zinni at the birthing retreat,
Mm,
and then it's time to go back in the office and carry out a plan in terms of trying to save Gemma,
Yeah.
something like that. Anyway, yeah, we're trying to project the plot of the next two episodes, and I trust the show, and probably will surprise us. We're not going to be right about like
Yeah.
the details of what's going to happen next. So we just wait and see. Wait and see. Um, yeah, but I did enjoy this episode. So apparently, shot mostly in Newfoundland. Um,
Yeah.
very
Over
striking visually.
striking visually, very interesting location, a town that they didn't have to do much to. It sort of had this aesthetic as they came in. Apparently, if you listen to the podcast, they spent 5 weeks there filming this episode. I mean, so yeah, just sort of striking that they were able to. And I guess Jessica Lee Gagne, who directed last week's, had filmed in this location before, was able to recommend it. But man, this is just I mean, talk about fitting the theme of what you're trying to do for a town that just looks like it's just gone to hell. This is exactly what they were looking for, I'm sure.
Yeah, and it was a real coffee shop, and I very
Yeah.
striking because I would imagine, just like a real place in the world that is like this. Again, it was very striking. So it would seem, in terms of the backstory, that there was a lumen factory in Salt's Neck that's now been shut down.
Yes,
Right.
I think
This
so.
is where Harmony and Hampton go. And we talk about
Mhm.
Hampton. We can talk about a bit about the struggle to learn the character's name or be sure about the character's name.
As of yesterday, IMDb was not listed what his name was. I think it does today, but yeah, it just was not clear.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. As of yesterday, the IMDb page for this episode was worthless. It listed a
Yeah,
bunch of people who aren't even in the episode.
right, exactly.
Um, which, in fairness, I think that it really kind of meaningfully is almost people like us who update that stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
People who have screeners and so on. But in the episode itself, the end credits just say James LeGros
Yeah, exactly.
without a name. And well, I mean, I guess we're talking about this now. I recognized him immediately.
Hmm.
What about you? Are you familiar with James LeGros?
Yes, yes, I did recognize. I had to go back and sort of the crevices of my brain to recall where I've seen him from. But yeah, I've seen this guy many places before. I mean, it seems like more than 20 years ago, but yeah, it used to be on lots of things.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you go through his credits, he still has been. He just like
Yeah,
pops up
yeah.
in small roles, but he's one of these guys who was in just like tons of indie films in the 1990s.
Hmm.
And I was the kind of teenager in the 1990s who met up with my friends, went to the video store, and
Yeah,
rented the movie, and like did that sort of thing for fun, and really went down a rabbit hole of watching all of these like indie films that were coming out and so on. I'm a
yeah.
big fan of Floundering, for example, which I would imagine like people haven't even heard of. So I was like, oh, cool, it's James LeGros. And and then throughout they are like withholding his name until the very end. And even then, I didn't feel positive about it. You know what I mean? Because
Yes.
right in that last scene, she's about to drive away in the truck and she turns to him and says, Hampton, in
Hmm.
a way where it felt to me like that was his name. But part of
I
me
almost,
kept wondering, is it like maybe a code word?
yeah, almost was like a tinge of a question, sort of like, I wonder if this was like a meeting place. We need to go, let's meet next at Hampton or something. But yeah, we've since gotten clear that it's his name, but it was not clear when just via the screeners.
Yeah, no, the inflection was great. And I actually said the exact same thing to someone, how it felt almost like a question, or like Hampton parentheses, I regret things.
Mm,
You know,
yeah,
it's a really great inflection from Patricia Arquette there, because we've gotten confirmation now that that is the character's name. If you listen to the official podcast and so on, Ben Stiller keeps calling him Hampton, right? So that's as good a confirmation as we can get, basically. I'll take it.
yeah.
But still, the way that she inflects it, it's like, okay, so it's just his name, but there is more there emotionally.
Yeah.
Um,
I almost got a sense of, obviously we're talking about the end now, but does she imply, but just by saying it, saying his name and saying it that way, it's sort of, will you come with me? Can we go do this together? And he's like, no, I'm going to stay and, come tempt these, whatever he says, tempers. I forget what the great line is.
Right.
But
Yeah, I mean, you can also read it that way. That almost like, why aren't you getting into your own truck?
yes, exactly. Exactly.
Um, because I'm going to stay and fight these bastards who are coming up the road. I guess. Who is coming up the road exactly? I don't quite think it would be Drummond for reasons we could talk. I mean, Salt Neck's fairly far away from Kier.
Yes.
Um, I mean, I suppose it might be possible to fly and get there faster, but
I wouldn't want to
um,
fly into that area.
I wouldn't think so. I wouldn't, who knows? Will we pick up there? Will we see Hampton again at all? Or will
Yeah,
that just be kind of left dangling? I'm really not
exactly.
sure. Um, but okay, trying to circle back here. So when they were kids, they worked in the ether factory together. That's how
Hmm.
it was an ether factory in Salt Neck that has since been shut down.
Yeah.
Now I can tie in here. It was actually shortly before we sat down to record, and I don't have a reference. I just heard someone say this or saw someone say this. But apparently, in a previous episode at the Chinese restaurant, they, I don't know if you can quite see it in the episode, or the owners of the restaurant put it out or something. Anyway, it's out there that apparently there was like a prop newspaper about an ether spill in Salt's Neck.
Oh,
I don't know if you saw anything about this, but again, I
no,
just caught it like right before we
I have
sat down
not.
to record. Um, so I don't know, maybe a little Easter egg there that we might pull in one way or another. Something has happened. Lumen's abandoned Salt's Neck,
Yeah.
and because Lumen's abandoned Salt's Neck, the town is destroyed. Basically, I love. By the way, I love the line he gives about retrenchment and stuff like that.
Yes. Ex- I was, I guess just need to sort of square the circle that that mine is, or that factory is shut down. I think that's clear. Lumen has abandoned the town. That's clear. And yet, Hampton still seems to be sort of the either supplier or the drug pusher to a lot of these people in town that remain addicted to it. So, man, I guess, are they still producing it somewhere? How is he getting these supplies of ether that he can give to, I mean, we see it given to the person in the coffee shop. There's a guy out on the step of an RV smoking it. Cobel and
Mhm.
Hampton have it in the house. So where are they getting this from if the factory is shut down?
It's just funny because well, clearly he's not going and mixing it up at that factory because he doesn't want to go there at all, right? And basically tells Harmony it's really messed up of her to ask him to meet her there,
Yeah.
right? Um, so it's not that he's making it in the defunct factory. It's something we should talk about at length in a certain way that we are in a world here where ether is very common and very commonly used, and still, whatever year it is, which is also a question. Um, Part of this I definitely would want to tie into the style of the show, which you could call that kind of cassette futurism or what have you, right? But
Mm-hmm.
here in relation to drugs, right?
Yeah.
Because in the
Yeah.
real world, ether use, I mean, medical purposes, ether was, as I understand it, like the first functional kind of anesthetic
Yes.
for like surgery and stuff like that, but also used socially slash abused or what have you. Um, it's an interesting substance, right? Like apparently you can drink it, but you have to like prep your stomach with cold water first because otherwise it'll boil in your stomach.
I've seen a couple of
Um,
references to, yeah, as it was used socially or recreational as a drug or as hallucinogenic, that there used to be decades ago something called an ether frolic where people would just go around and sort of show the effects of what this ether did to them. Interestingly, obviously, because Mr. Drummond has the word frolic tattooed
yeah.
on his hands, so there's some connection to that somewhere.
And frolic is one of the like virtues or tempers, or we need to get straight on the cure stuff. So at some point, we revisit that and get straight on our terminology. but yeah, it's like 19th century, right? So
Yeah.
there's all these reference points in the show that are also kind of old timey in that sort of way, right? As though Lumen, starting in the 19th century, carried forward more of the ethos of the 19th century. So, is ether still being used for medical purposes and so on in this world? I kind of think maybe,
Yeah.
right? Are there still lumen ether mills out there? Maybe.
Hmm.
At very least, we've got widespread use of it for recreational purposes.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, look, that's so different from the world we live in. I would have no idea how to get my hands on some ether to huff.
Yeah.
I mean, I literally don't think I could, you
Yeah.
know. As opposed to, whatever, marijuana, cocaine, even like opium or something like that. People, I've never known someone who has done ether,
No, nor
you
have I.
know.
Nor have I.
It's not an available thing really in our world. Um, Apparently the title is in part a reference to ether. They used to call it sweet vitriol, which is
Hmm.
interesting. Um, I also thought very fitting because, vitriol is kind of bitter
Yeah.
anger or resentment or whatever. So it also hits on that level. So kind of a great title tying together um, with a reference to ether with the emotions of Harmony and Sissy and Hampton, I guess.
Yeah, and not only that, but just sort of the duality of this thing that apparently has propelled Lumen to this state as this massive, wealthy, and important corporation, but also has destroyed so much along the way. Like it's just left this wake of, seemingly towns and people and lives that they've destroyed as they've gone. When something just doesn't work in the way they need it anymore, whether it be a factory, a town, or people, they'll just leave it behind.
Yeah, so Lumen abandoned this town. Not entirely clear when they abandoned this town, but
Hmm.
within the lifetime of our characters here, right?
Yeah.
We're getting the knowledge that Harmony worked in the ether factory with Hampton when they were children, right? He said those were
Yes.
child labor.
Yes.
At one point, she says she hasn't used ether since she was 8 years old.
Years old. Oh gosh.
So that we're really getting confirmation about like the child labor sort of aspect, which is interesting because Miss Wong, I think we've talked about this before. You know, people keep asking, why are you a child? Which is fair, but the actor is
Yeah.
18, right? Um, I don't know how old the character is.
Yeah. I think we get reference to 15 or 16 maybe.
Yeah.
Or something along those lines, but certainly meant to, and I guess this is the parallel to draw that Cobel was a child, apparently very smart. I think Sissy calls her industrious, important to what they were trying to do. So was recognized as that and was able to acquire one of these Wintertide fellowships. And apparently that's the same thing that Miss Wong has done. Somehow, somewhere,
Yeah.
she has shown potential or shown to be someone who is industrious and can model what they're looking for as a a Kier follower and is also in line for this fellowship. So just interesting. This just sort of almost seems to be like a gifted and talented recognition program that they're finding kids and putting them in these places where they can use them.
Yeah, something like that, you know. Is Wintertide broader than that? Is Wintertide just the name of this fellowship? Um, are they still running that school for girls, whatever it was called
Yeah,
exactly?
yeah, some boarding school for girls. Yeah,
Was Miss Wong there? Um, what's going on in terms of Sissy and also Harmony's mother, whose name I think is Charlotte
yeah,
from her
Charlotte,
previous
I
name.
believe. Yeah,
If we want her name. But so we were talking after we watched the episode and saying, well, it's okay, is Sissy her aunt? Um, or yes, I mean, I guess basically we confirmed that Sissy is her aunt. I mean, that's sort of what I was landing on originally, but that also feels confirmed by the official podcast.
Hmm.
Does that mean that Sissy is Harmony's mother's sister? Probably.
That's how I took it. Yes.
All of them have the last name Cobel.
Hmm.
Who's Harmony's father? Is a question I find myself wondering about.
Yeah, there's been, to my recollection, zero reference to that. We have no idea.
Yeah.
We are left to then speculate. I think the common road to travel down here is the father one of the Egans? Is it someone, I do wonder if these Wintertide kids are offspring of Egans. They've gone around and done whatever it is they do, and whatever the places are that they have their their places of business, and the spawn of Egan are identified and moved into places where they can better be used for the talents they may have.
Were they grown in petri dishes? Maybe she doesn't have a father. Maybe she's a
Yep.
clone or something like that. Why is Sissy's nickname Sissy? I think the plaque on the wall says her name is Celestine. I don't even know if that's
Mm.
how you pronounce that. Uh, Still, okay, sure, whatever, nickname.
Yep.
But at some level, you would think maybe it derives from sister. I don't know. I guess I could be wrong, but if you follow the thought that it is derived from sister, then it seems like that would be putting more importance on Harmony's mother than on Sissy. But whatever happened with Harmony's mother turned her against Lumen. She hated Lumen by the time she died, at least, we're told.
Yeah, the pieces that I feel like I've put together, and this could be off base, is that I think both Charlotte and Sissy were, and in Sissy's case still are, devoted, unwavering, zealous followers of Kier. They raised, in some capacity, Charlotte raised Harmony to be that way. Perhaps she was identified. I mean, you don't grow up at 7, 6, 7, 8 years old working in a factory and all of a sudden develop the ability to create something like Severance. So she was sent to a school by Lumen, and while she was at that school, her mother got sick, passed away. Sissy has resented her ever since that she never came back. And so there's been this rift between them ever since. But just sort of the trying to put those pieces together, that's kind of where I've landed.
Yeah, I mean, I think something like this. So, yeah, Harmony goes off to school. Her mother gets sick and dies. And Sissy, there's just so much weirdness that cuts through this. Like Sissy says something like, no one can go into her room
Yeah.
until we're all dead or something. Like, what's going on with that? Um, just, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if asking about who the father is the right question, but I feel like there's something here in the background of the connections between the Cobels and Lumen or the Egans. There's still something kind of there's a big piece missing, I think, in terms of what we don't know still.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. There is something that we're not told. I speculate that is something about the connection between Egan's and the Cobels, either some sort of relationship or I don't know, some way that their families have been connected or tied together, and we don't know what that is. But to the point where Harmony was at one point devoted enough and bought into the idea of Kier enough that she was able to turn over this thing that she created and said, "You can have it. It's to you use it for what you want." And at some point, it was, I don't know, I guess I'm now questioning, was that voluntary or was that required of her to do that? There are certain organizations and certain corporations that say, this is all about the greater good. This is not about the individual. So, we need to all take credit for this thing.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to read it that way. You ought not take credit. It's for Kier, or knowledge belongs to everyone, or whatever that kind of line
Yep.
is, right?
Yep.
But that then they kind of steal the credit from her, give it to Jane Egan, but she's devoted to Kier. She's devoted to
Mm.
Lumen. I'm not sure if those are the same thing or not exactly. Um, in other words, how much did she even mind before she got fired?
Yeah, I
Right?
think that's the question, right? Look at what I gave you and look at what you've been able to do because of it. You fire me, I'm the one that gave you all of this. Yeah, that's exactly how I think it is.
Yeah. So now she feels betrayed, you know,
Yes.
which
Yes.
does raise a big question about what is she planning to do next? What does she have in mind to do with this proof that she invented severance? Is it a power play within Lumen?
Yes.
Is it a power play against Lumen from the outside? How different do those look? You know, um, how much is she turned against Lumen is a big question in my mind, particularly if she is going to go meet up with Mark and Devin now and quote unquote help them.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that last line a lot. We the episode ends on "Tell me everything." Well, okay, tell me everything so that we can formulate some sort of plan to tear this thing down, or tell me everything so I can pretend I'm on your side and yet go get back in the good graces of Lumen by double crossing you and giving them all this information. I tend to think it's the former, but
I
I
don't know,
mean, how can
man.
you tell at this point?
I mean, you go, you get all the information from Mark, who's important. You double cross Mark and Devin and show up and threaten to go public with the details of Severance
Hmm.
that you invented. I mean, and I take it the point there would not be so much going public with, hey, I invented this, not Jay Megan, but going public with stuff like the overtime contingency, whatever the hell Beehive is,
What all
um,
that they're doing to Gemma, to people
everything
like
they're
that.
doing to Gemma,
Yeah.
yeah, and so on, right? Like that would be the scandalous thing. So, I mean, I think you could see Cobell going in that direction where what she really wants is her position of power, her rightful place in Lumen and to complete Cold Harbor because she cares about that project and wants it to be completed.
Yeah. And so that's I think the crux of this discussion. If we knew what Cold Harbor was and what the outcome is going to be, it's going to be one of the greatest moments in the history of mankind. If we knew what that was, we could probably better tell Harmony's intentions. But I mean, I just we just don't know. I think we'll know by the finale, but we just don't know right now.
Yeah. So it's possible maybe she is so pissed off
Yeah.
at Lumen and the Egans that she just wants to knock it down. Maybe her um reconnecting with Hampton a bit in this episode pushes her further in that direction,
Yeah.
and seeing Salt's neck now pushes her in that direction, and her altercation with Sissy pushes her in that direction. I could see where the narrative could go in that way, but man, I don't trust her from the point of view of Mark. You know what I mean?
No, no.
Being on Mark's side, I don't trust her, but I'm not sure I trusted Ragabi either. So it's interesting to see
I agree. And if you're
how this
Mark
will
and
play out.
you've just either in the past few hours or the past day or so woken up from, some sort of procedure that was done to you, why would you trust Harmony Cobel on the phone and just, here, tell me everything? Why would you do that? I have no reason to think why he would share everything with her at that moment.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about this briefly. I laid it out more in detail in my article this week on tvobsessive.com. That the timeline that doesn't quite add up here, I don't think. And then there's some other time stuff I also got into in that article. And I know we briefly mentioned here on the pod before, but I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole because it does become almost an aside. But just focusing on Cobell going to Salt's Neck,
Yeah.
right, in this season, we see her I almost need to pull up my article now as notes. Um, but anyway, we saw her on the road, right? She'd been sleeping in her car, and there was a sign that said Salt's Neck 282 or whatever it was exactly,
Yep.
238. Is that miles? Is that kilometers? It's one of those. And if it's kilometers, then actually that's less driving hours than if it's miles, right? If it's miles, that's like what, maybe a 4 hour drive,
Hmm.
presuming you're
Hmm.
going like 70. So, but okay, so she's there. She turns around, she goes back. I think that was like Friday night when we saw her
Yeah.
with Helena in the parking lot, because then you have the Ortbo
Hmm.
over the following weekend, right? Then Monday, we've got Irving's funeral and such. Tuesday, Mark leaves the office with a nosebleed.
Yeah.
So this is Wednesday when Mark has woken up and is there. That would be when Devin is calling Harmony, I think, right? But this is the same day that she arrives in Salt's Neck. This is implying that took her like 4 or 5 days to drive there, which just
Yeah.
doesn't feel right.
I think, and let me just use this as a moment to say, yeah, I was actually very intrigued by the case you laid out in your piece on tvobsessive.com for all of this in terms of the timing and sort of the just the inconsistencies that are there. So I do encourage people to read all of this. So yes, and you laid this out. There is a simple explanation. I'm gonna go camp somewhere for 2 or 3 days and figure out what I'm gonna do. What do I think about Lumen? What is my next course of action? And then she goes to Salt Snag. Okay, that's the easy thing to do. But to show that she was headed there and then show her leaving Lumen almost in a way implies like, no, I'm gonna go back to where I was going before. And so yeah, that timeline doesn't to me add up either.
Yeah, so I mean, I didn't really get into big speculative theory territory in my article, but there are some things out there like, is there some kind of weird time dilation sort of thing going on? You floated the idea on a previous episode of our podcast here that maybe the surrounding town of Kier is also like a secondary level of any almost,
Yeah.
or however we might put that theory. That's not really the external world.
Yeah.
So maybe
Yeah.
those things go together. But yeah, there are a number of things that don't quite add up about time. And my biggest point in terms of this, because I think there's a real temptation to say like, oh well, who cares, right? Just like wave our hands at this kind of stuff, like the cars all being old makes and models and things like this. But they call our attention to time
Yes.
so frequently, right? Like the passage from Rickon's book is about the clock on the wall. So it really does feel to me like the show is encouraging us to ask this sort of question when it comes
Yeah.
down to it. I think it's
And
going
you
to
made a
matter.
reference, yeah, you made a reference in your piece to the number of quarters or the quarter that is that
Hmm.
Irv has retired or left Lumen. So there are just specific intentional details like that
Right.
you don't have to put in. There's no reason for it to be put in unless you want either just sort of rampant speculation and people just scratch their heads at what if this all means, or there is something that makes it all connect somehow, and either in terms of the timing or how this is built, or are we in different, shows do this all the time. Are we in different timelines when we're seeing Severed 4 versus Audi World? I did
Right.
since
They
you
didn't have
mentioned
to
it.
they didn't have to show us Mark's birthday on his driver's license and things
Exactly,
like this. They could have
exactly.
just not done that.
I did find it interesting since you brought it up. So on the podcast that came out today, they've been doing this thing where they take questions from people that call in and ask them about the show, right?
Yeah.
Well,
On the
some
official
lady
pod.
called in and said, I have a 2019 car and I want to go, she's joking around. I want to go visit, but I clearly need to trade my car in for, a car made before the year 1990. How do I do that? Why are all the cars in Severance seem to be made, in the last century? And so Ben Stiller said two things, basically. That's just the way that the cars are, or just that's all that that's what the cars are like in the show, and that's the only cars we could find for the show. So two non-answers
Yeah, he
to a
totally
question that was
dodged it.
brought up. So, A, they bring that question up on the podcast for a reason so that you're thinking about it. And then B, intentionally don't answer the question because that's not true. That's the only cars we can afford for the show. That's just simply not true. So
Right.
they want us to be thinking about these things and why there are cars that don't exist prior to like 1996 of the show. These details matter, I think, is the point we're trying to make.
Yeah, I definitely think so. So really curious to see how that might ultimately tie in. Looking at our notes, I think we only have one remaining on my list, and I don't know that I have much to say about it. I just thought it was a really funny line. It really subtle in its humor when Harmony asks Sissy where her things are. Sissy says she sold them to the poor.
Yeah. I,
Didn't
I,
give them to the poor, just
I
sold them
mean,
to the poor.
I, the, I don't know that we will, but I hope that we see some more family, Harmony Cobel family dynamic stuff happen. I don't think that will end up being, a big part of the plot of this show, but just, yeah, what happened there? What is the relationship like this? And why are apparently Charlotte and Cicely so crazed for this thing that they're so devoted to? So, I mean, just I have no answer to that question. Just, why would you sell our things to the poor? But yeah, there's a lot of family dynamic stuff that I mentioned in.
Yeah, I just want to mention that because it's almost like it's one of those where it's almost like if you don't take a second to think about the line, you don't realize that there is something a little off and funny, right? That she's not
Yep.
like I gave your things to the poor. It's like no, I sold them to the poor. um, uh, the other big question that's been in the background, and I don't know if that we have a ton to say about this because it is such a big question, but we're learning that Harmony invented Severance. We've hit on this already. We can speculate about the context, but the bigger question I think is the reason or motivation, not just for why would Harmony do this? Because I don't know, maybe it's almost like a school project or something. You
Mm.
know, this is her master's thesis.
Yeah.
But why does Lumen want to do this? Um, I don't know. Any fresh thoughts on that big question of the series?
I don't know that I was I came up with any new insight after this episode, only in that is there a connection between the ether and the severance procedure, right? Ether is clearly something that is will affect or impact the mind. Severance does that as well. Are they being used in conjunction to make something happen or achieve the goals that they're looking for in a cold harbor situation? Or how are they using the ether to either enhance or adapt someone like Gemma into who they want her to be? Um, we're not getting a lot of answers on the ether side of things, whereas what Severance is, how it was created, how they're adapting is becoming slightly more clear as we go along.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you can see the kind of connection. You think back to the stuff we saw with Gemma in episode 7. I don't know how much we even talked about this on here, but it's very easy to land on the thought that, okay, well, can we use severance in relation to things that people don't want to do, like going to the dentist or flying, maybe fear of flying in particular,
Mhm.
right? Or um, tedious tasks like writing a bunch of thank you notes or whatever, right? Like, can we employ severance in all these ways where now it is, you don't have to do this stuff anymore.
Yeah.
It's going to be your innie and it's not going to be part of your experience. Um, then yeah, just connecting it with ether and thinking about ether as an anesthetic and that sort of thing. Well, like of course, one possibility would be severance for undergoing surgery. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
that's almost a starting point. We've seen it for giving birth, right? Um, Now, of course, the idea of you getting surgery, you're any getting surgery instead of anesthesia is terrifying. But
I,
you know,
I I did have a thought of what if they are experimenting with sort of severance pharmaceuticals? Well, instead of you having to go and, cut your skull open to get this procedure, well, we're developing some, and either is somehow works into a severance pill. Okay, you got a 4 hour flight. Well, here's the 6 hour severance pill
mm,
you take, something like that, whether they're experimenting with. We haven't seen any evidence of that, but is that a next step and logical of we're trying to, we're trying to create the person that we want that will do anything that we need them to do.
yeah, I mean, I kind of don't think so. I kind of think that their end goal is to have everyone get this chip, like everyone in
Mm.
the world, and to sell it to all of us because, oh man, how convenient and great will this be? You know, you don't have to go to the DMV. Your INI will go for you, right? I mean, you can just expand it out so much, right? Um, when and that Gemma is the test subject to testing on like the multiple severance.
Yeah.
But it's weird because I almost don't even know like why do you need that? Why couldn't it just all be one innie? I don't know. I guess that innie might start getting really upset
Yeah.
or something. So maybe you want the multiple innies for that reason. So I don't know. I mean, I kind of think that fits with what we've seen. I just continue to wonder if is there more to it than that because I have the sense that there
Yeah.
is. But
Yeah.
what's Cure got to do with it? You know,
Yeah.
um, how will it sire a new world? Um, all right. I mean, I think that about does it. Anything else you want to hit on before we wrap up here?
I think that's it. It's hard to believe there's only 2 episodes left, especially since we've been, away from Lumen for the past 2 weeks. But I presume the end game will become clear as we get into next week's episode. At least this season's end game.
Yeah, yeah. And I at this point expect a lot's got to happen in those 2 episodes. So, but I saw some people who were concerned about the runtime this week. It's only like 37 minutes. Just to
Yeah.
remind people, the season one finale is only 40 minutes long.
Yeah.
And a lot happens in those 40 minutes, right?
Yep.
So whatever run times we see for the next 2 episodes, this show has the potential to very efficiently do a lot of work in a short period of time. So
Yes, it does.
um, looking forward to it. As always, thanks for listening. Hope that you've enjoyed the podcast. If so, please do leave us a good rating, review, all that good stuff. If you're on YouTube, hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Really appreciate it. Check out tvobsessive.com. You can find articles there on Severance from me and articles on a number of other shows from various writers, including Ryan, who's currently writing on The White Lotus and Daredevil, Born Again. Um, for what it's worth, I'm also currently writing on Yellow Jackets. If you want to check out my work on Yellow Jackets. Um, follow TV Obsessive on social media, search for TV Obsessive, and we'll be back next week.
Yep. Looking forward to that, and we'll see you then.